On a cold Chicago night, a powerful CEO walked away from a gala, his life empty despite towers he had built across the skyline. In the pouring rain, he heard a trembling voice whisper, "Please, don't lock me in." And there, huddled in the shadows, was a little girl clutching a worn bunny, bruised and broken by a past too cruel for her small shoulders. What happened next wasn't about wealth or power. It was about a man who had lost everything, and a child who thought she had nothing left to hope for. Their paths collided, and together, they discovered that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can open the locked doors of the heart. This is not just a story of rescue, but of rebirth, of learning that love is the greatest empire of all. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to the Retold stories. The rain swept across the city like a curtain, blurring streetlights into watery halos and painting the alleys in slick reflections. At the edge of the Lockwood Grand Hotel, a black SUV idled quietly, its exhaust rising into the damp night. The gala had ended hours earlier, but Graham Lockwood had left before the applause faded. He slipped from the back door, bow tie untied, tuxedo jacket loose, the edges of his shirt clinging to his skin with rain. In his hand he still held a crystal glass, the whiskey untouched, the ice nearly melted. He had carried it not because he wanted to drink, but because it was something to hold when he felt himself unraveling. He paused by the vehicle and caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man who looked back was not the polished mogul gracing magazine covers, not the commanding presence that investors chased across conference rooms. This reflection showed hollow eyes, sleepless nights, and a silence that had become unbearable. His late wife's voice sometimes flickered in his memory during these moments, laughter echoing like a ghost that refused to fade. Her absence was a wound that never closed, and, tonight, in the rain, it felt raw again. He turned away from the glass and almost missed it. The faintest sound beneath the patter of raindrops. A fragile sob, so small, it could have been the wind. He stopped, listening harder. The alley appeared deserted, lined with dumpsters and boxes sagging under the drizzle. Then he noticed a subtle shift of movement, a shadow smaller than the rest. Curiosity and instinct tugged at him, pulling him closer. There, pressed against the brick wall between refuse bins, sat a child no more than 8 or 9. Her hair stuck to her face in wet strands, her knees drawn tight to her chest, and in her arms, she clutched a threadbare stuffed bunny like it was the last anchor she had in the world. She was barefoot. The soles of her feet were red from the cold, her oversized shirt torn at the sleeve, her skin marked by faint scratches. She did not scream. She did not beg. She whispered, so softly it barely carried through the storm, "Please, don't lock me in again." The words struck him harder than any deal gone wrong or loss he had endured. The crystal glass slipped from his hand and shattered soundlessly into the puddles, though he hardly noticed. His knees bent slowly as he crouched, his movements careful, deliberate, as if suddenness could shatter her further. Her wide eyes flinched at his outstretched hand, enough to make him freeze. His palm hovered, open but unmoving. His voice, rough from disuse, softened into something he had not heard from himself in years. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I promise." Under the flickering lamplight, her bruises became visible, a dark mark under her eye, a split at the corner of her lip. She said nothing, but her gaze held his, wary, assessing. The trust of a child already broken once did not return easily. Graham removed his jacket and extended it slowly. "No one's locking you in," he said, steady and low. "Not now, not ever." She studied the fabric as if expecting it to vanish. Then, hesitantly, her small hand reached out and took it. Her fingers were icy, trembling as she wrapped herself in the coat that swallowed her frame. For the first time that night, Graham felt something stir inside him, a warmth that pushed against the years of numbness. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice just above the rain. She stayed silent, her stuffed bunny pressed tight against her chest. "Do you have someone with you? Parents? Family?" Nothing. Her lips trembled, but no sound followed. He tried again, gentler this time. "You're not in trouble, but I need to know you're safe." She shifted slightly, the bunny's stitched ear brushing her cheek. Then, In a voice so faint he almost missed it, she asked, "Was I bad? Is that why they did it?" The question hit him like a blow. He had held his wife's hand as she slipped away, sworn he had felt the worst pain a man could feel, but this tiny, broken question undid him in ways grief never had. He inhaled sharply, struggling to find words. No explanation would suffice, not tonight. Instead, he pulled out his phone and spoke into it, instructing the hotel concierge to prepare the top-floor suite. He ended the call and looked back at her. "Come with me. We'll get warm. No one will hurt you here." She hesitated, eyes darting toward the alley's shadows. For a long moment, he thought she would run. Then she stood, unsteady, her knees buckling. He steadied her with a hand on her shoulder, gentle enough that she did not flinch this time. Together they walked toward the private entrance, rain still falling in sheets around them. The doorman opened the door without question, and the girl stopped at the threshold. She tilted her face upward, whispering, "If I go in, you won't shut the door behind me, right?" His throat tightened. "No," he said firmly. "I'll leave it open as long as you need." And he did. He stood in the doorway long after she disappeared inside, rain soaking through his shirt, wind cutting across his skin, until he knew she believed him. For the first time in years, Graham Lockwood felt a door inside himself crack open too, one that grief had sealed shut. He did not know what lay ahead, but he knew he would not close it again. The penthouse of the Lockwood Grand had always been a monument to control. Every painting was perfectly lit, every surface polished to a gleam. Nothing was ever out of place. Graham Lockwood had lived there for years, but it never felt like home. It was a gallery where silence lived louder than sound. That night, for the first time, the silence shifted. Wrapped in his jacket, the little girl sat small and still on the edge of the leather sofa. Her stuffed bunny was clutched against her chest like armor. She watched the elevator doors as if expecting them to open and reveal something she dreaded. She did not explore. She did not ask questions. She only held on. Graham moved behind the bar, staring at bottles of expensive liquor he had never touched. Instead, he fumbled with the coffee machine, scalded his hand, cursed under his breath, then managed to pour something warm. He set the mug on the table near her, careful not to crowd her. She hesitated, then took it. The steam curled around her face, her fingers trembling as they wrapped around the handle. She sipped in silence, her eyes never leaving him. He realized she was measuring every move, every breath, as though trust was a currency too costly to spend quickly. He canceled meetings that night, something he had never done. The quarterly review, the San Francisco partners, all dismissed with a brief call. His assistant protested, but Graham did not care. The only thing that mattered was the small figure curled on his sofa, staring at him as though her survival depended on his steadiness. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like fragile glass. "Lena," she said. That was her name. He repeated it softly, as though speaking. It aloud gave her existence more solidity. "I'm Graham," he answered. She nodded once. "I know. Your name is on the building." The word struck him. She had seen the name carved high above the streets but had no idea what it meant to him to hear it from her lips. As rain tapered against the windows, he asked questions gently. Did she live with her parents? A neighbor? A teacher? She looked down, clutching the bunny tighter. "I lived with Mr. Reed," she whispered. He asked who that was. She did not say. Just murmured that he hated questions, that he told her people lied when they promised to help. She said she was not supposed to run, but she had to, because the dark would last longer this time. The words chilled him. They were not about sadness. They were about a place small, locked, suffocating. That night, she jolted awake, screaming, hiding under the dining table, shaking, and whispering about the sound of a lock turning twice. Graham did not reach for her, did not pull her out. He sat on the floor nearby, his hand open and steady on the ground. He told her she was safe, that no locks would close here. Not now, not ever. Slowly, her small foot touched his wrist, a test of trust. He stayed perfectly still. That tiny point of contact became an unspoken promise. Later, when she fell asleep under a blanket, he carried her gently back to the couch. He did not sleep the rest of the night, pacing the floor, haunted by what she had endured. The next day, he called a private investigator. Within hours, the report confirmed what Lena's whispers suggested. Clint Reed, a man with no legal guardianship papers, had taken her under false pretenses. The investigator found a house in South Chicago, its basement locked from the outside, chains rusted, wood scarred by desperate scratches. Graham had driven there himself, stepping into the overgrown backyard, smelling mildew and old urine, seeing the cot and the broken tub inside. Rage rose inside him, colder than the rain. Money and power had never seemed so useless. None of it mattered against the horror of a child hidden in darkness. When he returned to the penthouse that night, Lena sat quiet by the fire, her bunny tucked under her chin. He brought her soup, offered to read, even asked if she wanted to watch cartoons, but she only shook her head. "No loud stories," she murmured. He nodded and stayed nearby, reading silently, his presence steady. Long after midnight, when she screamed again, he stayed. Each time she whispered fears about locks, he repeated the same words. No locks, no doors closed, not here. Within days, he brought in Melanie Cruz, a lawyer known for fighting child welfare cases, and Dr. Sinclair, a psychologist who came not with clipboards, but with puzzles and quiet patience. Graham cleared out the cold perfection of his penthouse lounge and turned it into a soft space filled with beanbags, books, and rugs. Lena chose herself. She did not smile, but her eyes lingered on the colors. Dr. Sinclair's evaluation confirmed the obvious severe trauma, hypervigilance, yet a resilience that shone through. Lena spoke little, but she stayed. That alone was progress. Graham found himself doing things he never expected. He built a small reading nook with his own hands, a curtain she could pull closed if she wanted. One evening he returned from a meeting to find her curled there with a book, the bunny under her arm. She had chosen the spot herself. He asked softly if he could read aloud, and when she shrugged, he sat on the floor beside her. By the third chapter, she was asleep. Her breathing even. The next morning, she left a drawing on his nightstand, a crooked house with a yellow keyhole wide open. No locked doors. He carried it in his pocket all day. Life shifted quickly. There were crayons on his cuff, spilled juice on his counters, mismatched socks by the sofa. Lena's laughter was rare but real, and when it came, it filled the room in a way polished. Chandeliers never could. At the grocery store, she argued over cereal with marshmallows. At home, she tugged at his sleeve, scolding him for purple stains on his shirt. He laughed out loud. Truly laughed, for the first time in years. He realized then this was no longer about protection. It was about parenting. One night at a gala, as speeches droned, his phone buzzed. Lena's voice came through, trembling, telling him she saw a car that reminded her of Reed's. Fear had risen in her chest, and she did not want to be alone. Without hesitation, he left the stage, walked out of the hall, and raced home. When she saw him, she ran into his arms. No hesitation, no flinch. Back inside, she whispered that her mind still believed sometimes, even when her heart knew otherwise. He told her it was all right, that healing took time, and he would wait as long as she needed. At night, after Lena had fallen asleep, he sat in his office with a sealed letter from Claire, the wife he had lost. Her words urged him not to lock love away, not to make grief his home. She told him one day someone would need him to open the door again. When he looked at the child sleeping in the next room, he knew that day had come. The door was open now, and he would not close it. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and nerves despite the polished wood and flowers set near the clerk's desk. Graham Lockwood sat at the petitioner's table, his navy suit crisp, but this time it did not feel like armor for business. It was a uniform of devotion, a way of showing the girl seated in the front row that she mattered enough for him to stand ready. His lawyer, Melanie Cruz, stood beside him, calm and unshakable. Her notes, marked with tabs and scribbles, that mapped the battlefield ahead. Across the aisle sat Clint Reed, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, the weight of arrogance clinging to him even as his world crumbled. For years he had hidden Lena in silence. Today that silence would break. Lena sat small in, her chair near the counselor, her stuffed bunny clean but worn, resting in her lap like a witness of its own. She wore the purple sweater Graham had bought her, and her legs barely touched the ground. She looked so fragile in that vast room, yet the courage it took to be there was greater than anything Graham had ever seen on the trading floor or in corporate towers. When the proceedings began, Clint's lawyer insisted there had been no abuse, only a child who misbehaved and required discipline. The words stung, but Melanie remained steady. She presented evidence of the locked basement, the chains, the bruises, and the suffocating dark. The judge's gaze shifted to Lena, asking gently if she could speak. Lena nodded. Her small hands clutched the stand as she climbed into the oversized chair. Her voice trembled, but it carried. She explained how the lock would turn once, then twice, how the dark stretched for hours, how silence became survival. She admitted she stopped asking questions, stopped making noise, because disappearing was easier. But then her eyes lifted toward Graham. "He didn't make me disappear," she said softly. He listened, even when I wasn't talking. The room fell silent. The judge's pen stilled on the paper. In that single sentence, Lena had spoken a truth that no evidence file could capture. When it was Graham's turn, he did not speak as a CEO. He spoke as a man who had once lost everything and found reason to live again. He shared his wife's final letter, the one urging him not to shut himself away, not to let grief become a locked room. He admitted he had done exactly that, until a frightened little girl appeared in an alley one rainy night. She did not need skyscrapers or fortune. She needed safety, presence, someone who would stay. His voice cracked only once, but he steadied it, declaring that he would stay for as long as Lena allowed him to. The judge listened intently, flipping through the file, then finally delivered. The decision. Custody was granted to Graham Lockwood, effective immediately. Permanence, protection, family. The courtroom blurred for Graham as Lena crossed the aisle and pressed herself into his embrace. "You came for me," she whispered. He placed a hand on her back, answering softly, "I never left." Outside, the city continued with its noise, but for him, the world was quiet in the best way. Lena's small hand clung to his as they stepped into the sunlight, her grip firm as if testing that he truly meant every promise. He squeezed back. In that moment, skyscrapers meant nothing. This was the only foundation that mattered. Spring crept into Chicago, softening the edges of the city. The penthouse, once sterile, now carried fingerprints on glass, drawings taped to the fridge, juice stains on the marble counter, and mismatched socks forgotten near the stairs. To anyone else, it might have looked messy. To Graham, it was proof of life. Lena hummed in her room in the mornings, her backpack ready by the door with a silver heart keychain he had bought on impulse, but she had cherished as though it was rare treasure. 3 months had passed since the court date, and already she called him Dad, first in whispers, then in laughter, and finally shouted across grocery aisles when she could not spot him. He learned how to braid her hair, badly, how to cook oatmeal with blueberries and honey because that was how she liked it, how to endure the toothpaste aisle as she debated between bubblegum floss picks. He watched her climb monkey bars at the park, fearless in ways she had never been before, her sneakers bright against the playground steel. A woman passing by asked if the child was his. For the first time, Graham smiled without hesitation. "Yes," he answered. "She's mine." At night, when the fire burned low, Lena curled against him on the couch, Bunny under her chin, and he handed her a small necklace with a delicate key. She held it up, eyes wide. "What? Does it open?" she asked. Graham brushed a strand of hair from her face and answered quietly, "Nothing. Because nothing is locked anymore. Not doors. Not hearts. Not you." She trembled just slightly, then leaned into him, whispering, "That's the best kind of key." She taped a new drawing to the fridge that week. A house with wide windows, the door open, and one word written carefully beneath it, home. The house did not echo anymore. It sang with the sound of crayons scratching paper, spoons clinking in cereal bowls, laughter spilling at unexpected times. Graham had built towers of steel and glass that touched the sky, but none of them had ever reached as high as the moment he promised a little girl she could stay. He realized now that strength was not in control or power. Strength was in staying, in opening the door and never closing it again. He had been a husband once, then a widower, then a man, lost in silence. But now, walking down the street with Lena's hand in his, he understood who he had become: a father. Sometimes the most powerful transformations do not come from boardrooms, bank accounts, or towering skylines. They come from the fragile voice of a child who has been silenced too long, from a whisper in the rain asking not to be locked away again. For Graham Lockwood, the man who once carried the weight of an empire, that whisper shattered the walls around his heart. It reminded him that no matter how much success the world offers, it cannot replace the warmth of a hand reaching for yours, or the quiet trust of someone who finally feels safe. Lena's journey from shadows to sunlight was not only her salvation, but his as well. Each step she took toward trust reflected a step he took away from loneliness. Together they built something no architect could design, no corporation could own. They built family, a home not defined by perfection, but by presence. A place where doors stay open, where laughter spills into rooms once silent, and where a child's drawing on the refrigerator means more than any contract signed in glass towers. Her bunny, her mismatched socks, her hesitant giggles, all of these became symbols of a life reborn. His willingness to stay, to listen, to show up without condition, became proof that even the most broken hearts can beat again. In courtrooms, in grocery aisles, in quiet evenings by the fire, their bond deepened. It was not grand gestures but small ones: the pouring of hot cocoa, the sharing of bedtime stories, the gift of a key that unlocked nothing and yet promised everything that changed everything. This story is not about wealth or charity. It is about courage. The courage of a child to hope again, and the courage of a man to open the door of his heart when grief had long kept it closed. It is a reminder that love is not about being ready. It is about showing up anyway, about saying yes when someone asks if they can stay, and meaning it for forever. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that there are always doors waiting to be opened, and always lives that can be changed by compassion. And if you believe, as we do, that stories of hope, healing, and humanity deserve to be told and retold, we invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories, share these tales, and help us spread light where shadows once lived. Because every story has the power to change a life, and sometimes it might just change yours too.